What is good, everybody? Welcome to the Bully Ball podcast here on the Gold Standard Podcast Network. I'm Rob Stats Guerrero, filling in for Jason Aponte, live from Las Vegas. It's Steph Sanchez. Steph, I haven't had a chance to talk to you since the Super Bowl ended. You're still in Vegas. I imagine that is not a fun place to be right now. How are you?
I'm as good as I'm gonna be, as good as we all are right now. It does suck to still be in Vegas. Like I just want to go home, hug my girlfriend, hug my cats. But I leave tonight and hopefully I won't have to see a lot of Chiefs and 49ers fans while I'm there.
I was so pumped when I was going home on Friday. There was literally a person at the gate of my flight giving away donuts. And if you were a Chiefs fan, you got one donut. If you were a Niner fan, it was so cool to be there before the game. To be there now, I think is probably the last place in the country that I would want to be. We'll dive into your thoughts on the game because I haven't gotten those yet. Plus, the 49ers are a nonstop content machine, Steph, and we already have new stuff happening, new potential drama happening with the 49ers, and we're less than 2 days out of the Super Bowl. So we're going to get to all of that. But before we do, I just want to give a shout out to our YouTube partners, Community Tree Service LLC. They've been with us for a huge chunk of the season. We're very grateful to them, and you should be grateful to them if you have a yard, because they will take care of it for you. Tree trimming, land clearing, hazard tree removal, home fire hardening, debris removal, from the Central Coast up to the Bay Area. Estimates are free. Call 831-763-2391. Email estimating@cts831.com or visit their website, communitytree.com. Schedule your appointment. Mention we sent you and that you're a Niner fan. You get $200 off. And Community Tree Service is licensed by the California State License Board, license number 1100816. I hate to go back to it, Steph, but what was your reaction to the loss?
I was gutted. I was very upset. Still am very upset. It was really emotional for me. I don't know if it was just excuse me. I don't know if it was just the grind of our season, right? Like following this team as closely as we have this year. But I don't know. I just feel like not just for me as a content creator, I feel like all fans kind of felt like this was one of the most heartbreaking losses that we have experienced, as a fan. Um, like for me, it definitely is. I don't know why this one just hit different. I think part of it had to do with some of that pain from the 2019 loss and feeling like this time it might be different. Um, and ultimately it not being different, right? I think that hurts. I think also knowing how much talent this roster had, um, and how many special players were on this team, how many guys we were pulling for to have this Super Bowl, right? Trent, Tashawn Gibson, Nick Bosa, who, balled his butt off in that game. Both Super Bowls, really. Twan Jennings, just got Purdy. Uh, just everyone. Like I was pulling for every single player to kind of have like a redemption story. And it hurts when you don't get that, right? So definitely was a heartbreaking one for me. And man, I don't even know. It's hard to kind of just move forward from this. I'm a little numb.
We can't even find Jason. Like, I don't know where he is. He is not responding to texts. I'm a little worried. Weston Smith says we'll get through it all together. That's right. We're not going anywhere. I know your channel's not going anywhere, Steph. We'll be with you through the entire off
Thank you,
season.
Weston.
We'll be going through it.
But you know what? You know what I want to say, Rob? Like
Okay.
everyone grieves like, these types of losses in different ways. So we're gonna give Jay, whatever time he needs. We're gonna give whatever fans that felt like they needed to unfollow, unsubscribe to just kind of clear their heads and all of that. We're gonna give them the time, but the people who want to be here to get them through this too, we're gonna be here for them as well. So just appreciate all of the fans that have been tuning into us all season, and we're all going through this together.
That's right. We will get through it. Helping the instant reaction show honestly helped me because I got to talk through a lot of it.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
I woke up the next day feeling even worse, unfortunately, but like it is a process and you do have to get through it. Let's remember, we survived after 2019. We survived after 2012, frankly, and we're going to survive after this one. It's going to hurt, but we'll be here and we'll get through it. I just got an email from the 49ers staff. Looks like John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan will speak today from the facility, 1 p.m. Pacific time. I would love for Kyle Shanahan to answer a bunch of questions. He Here's my frustration, Steph. Kyle is the reason the 49ers are as good as they are, but he's
Hmm.
also the reason they don't have a Lombardi trophy. I think both of those things are true because I think that his game management is a problem. Not going for it on fourth down in overtime is a problem. Not going for it on fourth down at the 2-minute warning in regulation is a problem. And that's the one I think that's not getting the scrutiny. It's 3rd and 5 at the 2-minute warning. If you convert on that third down, the Chiefs only have 2 timeouts. You can bleed the rest of that clock down and kick a field goal and get the hell out of Dodge. I thought what Kyle should have done was run the ball on 3rd and 5. If you want to kick the field goal after that, you still can. You might get the first down, or it might be like 4th and 1, and maybe you just say, screw it, we're going to quarterback sneak it, or whatever. But he didn't do that. He played it safe. He didn't take the Super Bowl. He let it linger in the air. And those are the 2 decisions that I think will haunt us for a long time.
I don't know if I agree with what was one of the things you said. I didn't agree with everything you just said, but I do
Going for it
think
on the 4th downs,
no, like I think I feel you on that.
running on 3rd down.
Running, yeah, sorry. Definitely feel like at that point in the game, it felt like the Chiefs had kind of I'm thinking of it like a snake for some reason when they wrap themselves around a prey and just squeezing tighter and tighter. I feel like as the game progressed, the Chiefs' run defense improved and improved, right? And we saw there were several times it after halftime where the 49ers were trying to run the football, and actually it's part of the reason they got into those 3rd and 5 or longer situations when they did. So while I do agree they should have gone for it, um on fourth down in those situations, I also understand why you wouldn't want to run it. But look, Kyle Shanahan, he's a very smart guy. You know, we know he has a lot of tricks in his bag. We know Andy Reid on the other side has a lot of tricks in his bag. He has plays that like will work no matter what. And so I would love to see more of that from Kyle Shanahan. And who knows? Maybe he did have some of those plays because we did see some plays get pretty much blown up by the protection. And, Steve Spagnuolo, Chris Jones, all that defensive line doing what they could to stop the 49ers. And as a lot of people have said throughout this week, they get paid to make plays as well, right? So they're doing their jobs. And so it just seemed like in those crunch moments, they did their jobs better than the 49ers in terms of the execution of it all. But I would have liked to see, I think Kyle be a little more aggressive in that situation. I feel like Kyle Shanahan slow plays games a little bit. Like he's more reactionary. He wants to see what you're going to do first so he can react to it. When in Super Bowls and in games like this, you can't always do that. I mean, you can't just leave it up to the person you're going up against, right? I think, like you said, you got to take those opportunities. You got to take Super Bowls. So you got to take risks. And yeah, I think that involved going for it on fourth down there, trusting your offense, maybe as much as you do your defense. Clearly, he trusts the defense. He
Why?
kept putting them in situations to stop
Exactly.
Patrick Mahomes. They had been successful doing that, most of the game, but it's Patrick Mahomes. Anytime, like if anyone says Patrick Mahomes gets one more chance, famous last words, right? Like
But Steph,
you just know how that's going to end.
but that exactly. So then why are you you're handing that to the Chiefs by taking the ball first in overtime? That's the one situation you would want to avoid if you're the 49ers, right? Is Patrick Mahomes with the ball in his hands where a touchdown wins him the game. And yet Kyle says, Here you go, Patrick. We're just going to give it to you. They won the coin toss. That was in their control, and they gave it away. And Kyle's explanation was ridiculous. We're worried about the third possession in overtime. Kyle, it's never getting to a third possession, ever. Because even if you score a touchdown, the Chiefs get the ball, they score a touchdown, they're going for two. They're not going to kick the ball off to you. Andy Reid's not going to give you the ball back. He's going to say, hey, 15, we're 2 yards away from a title. I'm living and dying with you. And when my head hits the pillow, my conscience will be clear. Like Kyle, like he never considered that because in his mind, going for two there is so far beyond what he's prepared to do that he never even considered it. And it totally botched his decision-making, Steph. That was a terrible decision by Kyle Shanahan.
To be fair, Rob, I think it's easy for us to be like, well, why can't he do this when Andy Reid does this with Mahomes? I mean, I think if Kyle Shanahan had Mahomes, he'd probably go for those too because there's no one you can trust more. I think in the NFL right now than Patrick Mahomes in those go ahead moments. So it's the same but different. So, I mean, at the same time, though, yeah, I would have liked to see more aggressiveness. I think, like, obviously that's something we talked about going into this game. We kind of feel like Kyle had turned the corner. He did go for it on fourth down earlier in the game.
Yes, and I
I
loved
just
it.
don't know why. Clearly, like, he wasn't feeling great about the offense's chances to convert at that point in the game like he did earlier. Otherwise, I think he would have done it. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions hanging around right now about, Kyle's decision making, and we've been here before, right? So it's definitely a trend. My thing is, um, I don't I don't know how much we can expect Kyle to learn from it, right? Like that's the thing that it seems like he's a bit of a he's a little stubborn, when it comes to these things. I do feel like there were some plays that he called that were there and they just simply were not executed, right? So I'm sure for him that's a little frustrating as well. But as the head coach, you're responsible for the execution as well, right? You had 2 weeks to prepare this team for this moment, um, and it sucks because after these losses, we hear about how detail oriented this Chiefs team is, right? And then it's easy to point back to Kyle and be like, "Well, they're doing all this, Kyle. What are you doing?" kind of thing. So it just doesn't feel like Kyle's in that same level of detail. And of course, Andy Reid has been through all of the stuff Kyle Shanahan is going through right now before. He's learned from it. It's taken several years for him to get to this point, and it's also taken him having Patrick Mahomes to get him to this point, right? So Kyle Shanahan isn't there yet. Um, we just gotta hope at some point he will be, right? But I don't know. I need to see, I guess, m- more acknowledgement from Kyle. I get it's hard. It's hard. Like in the moment to admit like you're wrong when you're so heartbroken about the loss. It's got to be difficult. But very curious to see what he says today in the presser.
Yeah, and again, they'll speak at 1 p.m. Pacific time today. I don't even need him to acknowledge it publicly. Yeah, that'd be nice. I need him to change on Sundays. Like, I don't
Yeah.
care if he ever says I
Yeah.
was wrong. Like, he went for it. It was 12. I think there was like 12 minutes left in the game. It was 4th and 2. He could have kicked the field goal to tie the game, and instead he went for it on fourth down. You had faith. You got the ball to one of your all pros on offense, and Kittle did an all pro thing at the all pro time. He converted. 2 plays later, they go down and get a touchdown, and they take the lead in the Super Bowl. And I was like, yes, he gets it. Finally. And it worked out. And that's why I'm so stunned that he didn't do it at the 2-minute warning and he didn't do it in overtime. I don't understand the difference in those situations. He said after the game, well, we went for it because we were playing Patrick Mahomes and, he's going to score. So we wanted to keep going. Yes. So what was different about the other 2%? The stakes got bigger, Steph, and he got scared. I really think he coaches in his fears, and that's holding him back. It's a weird thing, but by trying to avoid the worst case scenario, he never achieves the best case scenario. And it's so frustrating because he's so good at so many different aspects of that job. But the game management thing, he's not good at it. And it's fixable. He can fix this, right? He can change. That's another part that makes it so frustrating. Is this not like, well, it's not like trying to make Brock Purdy 6 inches taller. There's nothing we can do about that. Kyle can change. This can be fixed. And unfortunately, I don't think it will be.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. I think when I play games and I'm just trying to draw like the best comparison I can to like playing a game and you're playing against someone in any kind of thing. I'm not talking about sports here because I'm clearly not athletic, but I just mean like if I'm playing again a game against someone and we're playing a lot of rounds and sorry the dog in the background. um I think if what I'm doing the first couple of times that I've lost is not working, I'm gonna try to change my approach somehow and see if that works, right? And like you say, I don't think Kyle's really gonna get over that hump until he tries something different, until he tries something new and just sees if that works.
And he's had front row seats to the biggest lessons of all time in multiple Super Bowls, right? You would think if anything was going to teach him a lesson, it would be things learned during the biggest games of the season. And yet, uh, he's not. I don't think he's going to change, unfortunately. It's very, very frustrating. Rick Diaz says, can I give you thanks, Rob and Steph, for reporting the 49ers the whole season? Thank you very much. Keep going, doing the good work. I would like to hear from both of us each day as possible. Go 49ers. Don't worry. We are not going anywhere. Have you heard back about the combine, Steph? I know you're trying to get credentialed for the combine.
I have not yet, so I'll keep you posted on that. I'm really trying to go. It's the end of this month, so
Mm-hmm.
uh yeah, still waiting though.
Well, keep us posted because if you're going, I'm trying to get you an interview with either Nick Bosa, who actually Bosa probably won't be there, but I want to get you an interview with John Lynch. If you're going, I'm going to try and get you a sit down, face to face John Lynch interview because I think you've earned it and I think it would be damn good. So hopefully we can make that happen. James Welsh, thank you for the super chat. Andy almost certainly never gets where he is without Patrick Mahomes. Whether we like it or not, Kyle will likely need a better quarterback than he's got to get there, too. I do think that Mahomes certainly makes every coach look better. He can solve a lot of coaching issues. But even with all that stuff, even with all of that stuff, and even with some fluke things that went against the 49ers that are totally out of Kyle Shanahan's control, like the Chiefs recovering 6 of the 7 fumbles in the game, they still should have won it if Kyle had made the right decisions. And that will stick with me forever.
Yeah, I mean, look, there were a lot of points in this game that I think were opportunities for the 49ers. They had several opportunities, and that's why I say like, yes, Kyle Shanahan, did make some, you know, questionable decisions late in the game, but I don't even think it should have come to the end of the game.
Yeah.
There were so many execution issues even before that. I mean, Christian McCaffrey fumbling in what was probably the 49ers best drive of the game. That hurts, right? Because like I said, it was like a snake, wrapping themselves around their prey, the way that the Chiefs defended the run. That was their best chance, the 49ers' best chance to move down the football, get that run game going. Who knows what would have happened had the 49ers scored there? I mean, I don't even know if we really get the same adjustments from the Chiefs had the 49ers scored. So, I mean, yeah, it's sorry.
What is
It's
happening over there?
the dog, my cousin left, so her dog is
Oh.
that's how I was after the game, actually. So just a little sneak peek, I guess. But yeah, so I mean, there were a lot of moments in the game early on that I felt the 49ers just did not capitalize on. The Pacheco fumble as well, where the 49ers couldn't get points off of that.
Yep.
Man, there's the interception. Couldn't get points off of that either. And that was after halftime. I was totally expecting the Chiefs to come out of halftime and be like this completely different team.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but they came out of halftime. Patrick Mahomes throws that interception. That was a perfect opportunity for the 49ers to really like put their foots on the Chiefs' necks. And they they couldn't capitalize on that opportunity as big as it was.
Yeah, it was brutal. They couldn't even gain a yard after the interception. They went backwards. That was even worse. Jason PDSI says this feels like a loss that divides the team. The coach loses the locker room, and we're back to 2-14 with some college dork at head coach in 3 years. Speaking of losses that divide the team, Steph, we started to see some things on Twitter that maybe got us a little upset. John Feliciano tweeted about the third down in overtime where Chris Jones was unblocked. He tweeted, "A quick chop is not needed if the guy that was supposed to block him blocks him." Spencer Burford, who would go on to admit that he was the guy that was supposed to block him, said, "Sheesh, I open up my app to this. Get well soon, bro." Now, to be fair, Feliciano also tweeted an apology to Spencer Burford and said, "Hey, I woke up hungover. I was in a bad mood. You're going to be great." He apologized to Spencer Burford. So I want to point that out. But, Super Bowl losses have consequences. We saw it destroy that Seahawks team when they lost to the Patriots. I'm sure there are some people that are not feeling great after this Super Bowl loss, and these things do have consequences. So I didn't love seeing that, Steph.
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a good point, right? Like these guys are human who had to live this. I mean, we're distraught and we're just fans watching it all, right? So these are guys who are really emotional at this time, and at reactions are gonna occur. I mean, feelings are at the surface, and yeah, if you mix that with alcohol and being hungover, you might not get the best results. I'm not a huge fan of Feliciano. Going on the internet first, there were a lot of 49ers players who took to Twitter to kind of let off some emotions. There was a
Yep.
lot of course, other players of other teams, talking about the 49ers and, poking fun at them for this loss. And they responded to it. It's like, God, like just get off of Twitter, man. There's nothing good that you can see or that would happen based on you being on Twitter. So it's like it's gonna do more damage than good. I mean, I yeah, it was unfortunate to see, but I mean, the fact that he apologized and it seemed like they worked it out. That's a good thing about men. Like when they argue, yeah, just quick apology, handshake, we're good. So it seems like that's the case here for Feliciano and Burford.
Chris Maldonado says, "I haven't watched anything. I've only listened to the Gold Standard podcast so far since the L. It hurts bad." Honestly, Chris, thank you. By the way, Chris is a YouTube channel member. If you want to be a YouTube channel member, I realize you probably don't want to be a member of anything right now, but if you do, that's less than $3 a month. You can really help support the channels. You get custom emojis, you get membership badges, you get priority comment response. Please consider it. And then there's this, Steph, the Brandon Ayuk situation. Just going to throw this up here. This is Brandon Ayuk's Instagram. Don't forget what got you there with the eyes. Is he talking?
What do you think that means?
Right. Is he talking about running the football? Is he talking about his incredible season that he had? Because remember, he only had 3 catches in the Super Bowl. In fact, he only had 3 catches in every single playoff game. Now, some of those were very impactful catches, obviously, but only 3. So I don't know specifically what he's talking about. He wants a new contract. So is he talking about, hey, I had a really good year. Don't forget that. Pay me my money. I don't know. And I guess we just were left to speculate. But then his girlfriend also said, hey, we may not be back in Levi's ever again after today, after they clean out the locker. So there's a lot swirling around Brandon Ayuk.
Which, I mean, first of all, for anyone who's concerned about that, that's cap because the 49ers picked up his 5th-year option. He's going to be on the 49ers next year, I guess, whether he likes it or not. So that is simply not true. That
You wouldn't
it
trade
would
him?
be the last time. Will the 49ers trade him?
They could.
No, I mean, could Brandon Ayuk, threaten to want to be traded? Look, these are all negotiation tactics, and the way that all of this came out, his best friend talking about it, his partner talking about it. To me, it was so obvious what was happening. Like it like clockwork. The second the clock turns 0, it's like, well, now let's try to get BA his contract. Let's try to help him out here. because it's the exact same tactics that Debo Samuel did. In this case, they're starting early. They're wasting no time to get all of this out here. I'm not worried about it because what do we know about all of this? Yeah, all this noise is going to happen. All these people who aren't Brandon Ayuk, mind you, he's a grown ass man. I mean, he doesn't need anyone else on the internet talking for him and talking about what he wants or where he wants to go and all that. So none of that means anything to me. Yes, even his wife could say anything. I mean, really, at the end of the day, it's about what Brandon Ayuk wants. He wants a bag, right? So I get that. Guys are going to do what they need or what they feel they need to get that negotiation in their direction because everyone at this point knows how the 49ers try to play hardball. So you got to do some, extracurricular stuff to try to move the negotiations in your favor. And all right. So I think yeah, I'm not worried about it. Like we know the negotiations don't happen on the internet. That's not the case. I feel like John Lynch has said something like that too. Like none of that even matters to us. Um, you know. So I think it's going to get done. The 49ers have a lot of maneuvering of the cap to do, which I'm sure we'll talk about all throughout this offseason, but
Hmm.
this really does not worry me at all.
I would be totally, I've said on the record, I'm totally fine if the 49ers moved on from anybody this offseason. Brock, Christian McCaffrey, Debo, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, anybody. I'm totally fine with it because I think things have to change. Running it back with this group, it's just not good enough. Wilkes at defensive coordinator.
What do you mean it's not good enough though? Like, uh, they literally got to the Super Bowl with this group. This was a group that should have won the Super Bowl.
No,
So
don't
I
say
mean, if you're
that.
no, they should have because if you're over here and you're like blaming Kyle Shanahan for this, then why is it like well the players need to be replaced or I don't mind if we switch all these players, uh, you know I mean, it's still going to be the same head coach. So what is changing the players really going to do for you? This was the best roster that Kyle Shanahan has had.
That's a fair argument, quite honestly. And you're right. I don't want to change the head coach because unless you can get Andy Reid, I think that Kyle is the best coach you're going to get. So maybe you're right. Maybe changing the players won't do anything. But I just feel like you're asking this group to climb the mountain again. And at least Brock is not really part of it because, he hasn't been here as long as some of the rest of the people. So maybe that's enough. But it's hard to keep that hunger, Steph. It's hard to keep that desire to go back to zero and do it again when you haven't achieved that. And so that is, to me, that's a
So
scary thing.
so that's different, right? I'm with you on that because I do think it's difficult for guys to do this, go through the grind of the season and feel like they can do it again. And I think sometimes players just need a change of scenery, right? To get that back, right? So
Man, I don't know, like there are some people or some animals going through it over there, Steph.
it's
Carla,
just one. It is
oh,
just
okay.
one dog. It's puppy, but yeah,
Carlos M
separation
said,
anxiety is real.
Shanahan said he wished he scored a touchdown and didn't give Kansas City the ball back. I actually didn't see that. Um, if he said that, that's obviously really bad because it proves he didn't know the rule, which you would think your head coach would know the rules of the game he was about to play in the biggest game of his career. There's actually maybe this is the video of it from Grant Cohn. Let me see if I can share this really quick.
Yeah, actually, so that I saw that clip. That clip is not from it. That clip. He was talking about the fourth quarter, I believe. He was not talking about overtime.
Oh, okay. So,
So
and we
so
need
that one is getting misinterpreted, and people are sharing it like this is proof that Kyle Shanahan didn't know the overtime rules. No, that's not the case. Now that doesn't excuse some players not knowing the overtime rules in my book, but that clip that's surfaced and is being shared, that is not about overtime.
Okay, which I agree, by the way. That's why I wanted him to go for that fourth down at the 2-minute warning because you could have bled the clock out if you got it. But we've already kind of plowed that ground. Chris Maldonado says, seeing my kid's face broke my heart after the game. My son, Steph, as soon as the Chiefs got a first down on the final drive, just went up in his room and closed the door. And it was like, dude,
I feel that.
I get it, man. It felt inevitable at that point. Brother, really, Kyle? Bob says, Steph, great to see you, baby Bosa. What's up, Stats? We appreciate the super chat. For Life Niner says, if you don't learn from 3 Super Bowl losses, you got to go. It's frustrating that these lessons have not seemed to sunk in yet. Fish and Chip says, before the Super Bowl, didn't Jed give Kyle a pass at a loss? Yes, he did. He absolutely basically brushed off the idea of replacing Kyle. Jed did far too much talking, if you ask me, before the Super Bowl. Brother Bob said, it's not misinterpreted. Listen to the clip. Let me just throw it up really quick here, because I haven't heard any of it, and I would like to hear it because it's been, now that I saw it, it's on my mind.
Had another chance. Draw, and again, it went into overtime. But is there anything right now that you feel like was the difference down the stretch?
I mean, love to score a touchdown there at the end. Not give Pat another chance.
Yeah, see, that's not specific enough to know which point he's talking about. Because, like we said, at the 2-minute warning, he could have scored a touchdown or converted the first down, bled the clock out, and scored a touchdown. So I don't know if specifically he was talking about overtime.
I mean, we know for a fact Kyle knew the overtime rules, so I highly doubt he was talking about the overtime. But yeah, it isn't specific enough for sure.
James Welsh says Brandon Ayuk wants to be a true number 1 wide receiver in a different system and a superstar quarterback. This isn't just about a contract. You're wrong if you think there's no chance he's traded. Don't be surprised if he's in Houston. Hell, if I were the Chiefs, I would go try and trade. Like, if I were the Chiefs, I would easily give up a first-round pick for Brandon Ayuk. Like, you're not going to draft a better wide receiver than Brandon Ayuk where the Chiefs are going to be picking. I think that if you made the right offer to the 49ers, I think they would accept it, and I think they should.
But why does it need to be BA? Like, if I had to choose between a lot of these playmakers, BA would be the one that I would want to keep. Now, is it fair that Brandon Ayuk wants, to have a bigger role in the offense? Yes, he's an alpha wide receiver. Like, he is a wide receiver 1. And wide receiver 1s around the league get wide receiver 1 targets, right? And that hasn't really happened. Especially in the playoffs, it kind of fell off. So I totally feel like he should want to have that type of role in an offense. But, if it came down to him wanting to get traded, I think the 49ers should be like, look, we'll trade someone else, give you the bag. Money talks. Money talks. Like, this was the exact same conversations we were having with Deebo Samuel. And mind you, Deebo Samuel had literally a historic season when he was coming off of that one and negotiating his contract. So, Debo probably had even more of a right to ask for the type of money he was. But at the same time, Brandon Ayuk is a wide receiver. Like, he's an X receiver. Whereas, Debo plays more of a role. Debo had a hard time getting open, as a wide receiver on Sunday. He got the clamps put on him pretty good, which is what, a lot of corners that he's argued with this season has kind of talked to him about. But I digress on that one.
Brother Bob is back, says exactly. If he felt that way in the fourth quarter, then go for it and not kick the field goal. The problem is he didn't do that, so he ended up giving Pat another
We
chance.
both agree on that one. We all agree here on that.
Right.
Fine.
We are united in that. So if you're going to trade Debo, you got to do it post June 1st. Otherwise, you take a massive cap hit. If you do it post June 1st, the cap hit is $6.65 million. So I would agree, if I could choose who to trade, I would pick Debo over Ayuk because Ayuk stays healthy and Ayuk blocks. And that's the 49ers need that. I just think the contract situation, because if you have to wait till after June 1st, Steph, then that means it's after the free agency, it's after the draft. So unless you trade Debo for another player, you have to wait a whole year to get the benefit from that. So I just think contractually it's easier to trade Brandon Ayuk because there's no cap hit whatsoever. I think the Niners owe it to everybody to look into it. I really do. I think if you can get, especially if you can get multiple picks back for BA, that's what the Niners need. They need an injection of youth and cheap players onto this roster. So I think you have to explore it.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is whenever you are getting players off of this team and natural attrition happens, you need to have good players coming in too
Mhm.
if you want to be able to sustain the success that you've had. So that's easier said than done. Ronnie Bell, non-existent after week 3 of the season, um, and I kind of think he fell victim to the doghouse. It
Mhm.
kind of seemed like. So we'll see how that shakes out. He also isn't like a wide receiver one. Obviously, he's more of a slot guy. So I think hopefully the 49ers would either like draft someone. There's a lot of wide receiver free agents out there too. So there would be way more that would need to go into if you trade one guy. Okay, now we got to think about who do we bring in that can potentially, be as effective of a wide receiver room. So it's not always that simple, but I hear you. The 49ers are going to explore every option internally, whether we catch wind of it or not.
Rich S says, I feel that the Niners weren't sharp since the end of the regular season and the whole playoffs. We peaked at the wrong time. We got kind of fortunate with bad coaching decisions and lucky bounces to get to the Super Bowl. I would agree that they peaked at the wrong time, Steph. And look, you can't control that. I mean, obviously every team wants to be playing their best in the playoffs, but clearly the 49ers' best was the Dallas game and the Philadelphia game. And we kept waiting for them to get back to that, and they just never did.
And Kyle Shanahan even talked about that going into this one, right? Like he didn't feel like they've played their best game yet. And really the closest was, those 2 games. So yeah, it definitely feels like they left a lot out there. And really couldn't quite reel it all together for one game, which is unfortunate. But again, like I do think that comes down to the coaching. As far as like a specific thing to blame, I can't really say because I don't know what Kyle Shanahan does in meetings or like it's kind of hard. But at the same time, like he's the head coach, so those things, do fall on him.
It seems like motivation is a weird problem for this team. We know one thing. They had the Dallas game circled on the calendar and they had the Eagles game circled on the calendar, and they destroyed those teams. They absolutely physically dominated those teams. And then they weren't as focused. Nick Bosa said it. We were smelling ourselves after that one. We thought we were the team we needed to be. Fred Warner said, oh, we learned our lesson, right? We're going to take it one game at a time. And yet here we are in the NFC Championship game. And what are we talking about again? Effort, motivation. It wasn't there in the NFC title game, Steph. And then all of a sudden the Super Bowl happens. And what do we say? Boy, the defensive line looks like they're playing really, really hard. Like, I put that on the coaching staff, everybody, not just Kyle. I put it on Chris Kasarik because his unit specifically has been called out. I put it on Wilkes because his defense was called out. It's the coach's job to get this team motivated and ready to play. And for a lot of games this season, they weren't.
When it comes to effort, who specifically do you think didn't show effort on Sunday? I
On
didn't have
Sunday, they did. But like in the NFC
okay.
Championship game,
Yeah.
they weren't. Chase Young wasn't. The defensive
Yeah.
linemen weren't. Like, they just weren't. You saw the difference in how the defense came out. The
Yes.
defense came out in the Super
Absolutely.
Bowl and looked awesome early
Okay.
in
Yeah,
that.
I thought you were talking about Sunday. That's why I was like, no, I
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
have an issue with effort on Sunday. I think, yeah, it did show that clearly that again they left some meat on the bone in previous weeks, right? So, uh, but what's difficult about that? Like that some players can put their all in and still not get the win. Like to your point about effort, that's part of it right there. It's hard to stay motivated when you try as hard as you did and you put the 100% in and you still can't get the win. So, yeah, I mean that's part of what I think is going to be difficult and the greater challenge in my book as far as how this team is going to move forward. We talk about, the free agent, the contract stuff. Sure, like the 49ers have kind of had to maneuver through that before. I understand this time it's a little more extreme, but in
Mhm.
my book, like the biggest challenge going into next season is going to be getting over the hump of getting back into that drive. It's so difficult, and Nick Bosa even talked about it, how hard it is to climb the mountain and not get it done, right? And have to do it again next year. Like that's hard emotionally, right? And so that's just human nature. But something that Kyle Shanahan and this coaching staff is really going to have to wrangle the guys to get them back in. And the players have to believe what you're selling. And it gets harder to believe that when, it doesn't work out the way you've been told it would. So that's going to be the challenge for Kyle Shanahan more than anything going into this year, I think.
Oh, and that's why I wouldn't be opposed to them switching some of the players out, right? You get new players in there that haven't heard that message before, and that job becomes a little easier. Now, replacing the skill is not easy to do. Brother Bob is really on this, Steph. He says, if Kyle knew the rule, why didn't his players know it? Why did he decide to take the ball first in overtime? Kansas City players said they knew the rule, and they would have gone for 2. First of all, Mecole Hardman caught the game-winning touchdown and didn't know the rule. Patrick Mahomes had to tell him in the end zone that he won the Super Bowl. So, let's not act like every single player on the Chiefs knew the rule and every single player on the 49ers didn't know the rule. Armstead said he didn't know the rule. Juszczyk said he didn't know the rule. It doesn't mean every single player on the 49ers didn't know the rule. So, let's, I feel like that's a narrative that's getting out of control now, that none of the 49ers knew the rule and everybody on the Chiefs knew the rule. No, there's a lot of people in that locker room. I guarantee you not everybody was on the same page.
Yeah, in 95.7, The Game put out a tweet that said,
I saw.
Kyle Shanahan did not know the overtime rules. Yeah, Kyle knew. And he also knew what he was doing when he decided to take the ball first. Now, was it the right decision? That definitely can be argued because Kyle Shanahan said he was playing for the third possession. Well, you don't really know if you're going to get that third possession. That is kind of part of the problem, right?
Right.
But he knew what he was doing. That is what he wanted to do. So clearly, Kyle Shanahan did know the rules. I find it wild that Mecole Hardman didn't know the rules, or maybe in that moment it was like he didn't really know what was going on. But because Chiefs players said like they literally have like a rules advisor, rules person that comes in and for the last 2 weeks was like preparing them for all these different rules and all this. So was Mecole Hardman not in those meetings, or was he just not paying attention?
Checking the phone.
I don't. Yeah, checking the phone. I don't really know. So just really interesting. But yeah, of course, that's going to be one of the anytime there's a Super Bowl loss, there's going to be one thing that someone fixates on, or a couple things that people fixate on. And unfortunately for Kyle, it is this overtime thing. But really, I'm standing pat with that. The 49ers shouldn't have even let this game go to overtime, right? The moment it went to overtime, this game was over in my book, right? So I don't even care what happened at overtime. What needed to happen was the 49ers taking the Super Bowl before it even got there.
When you need to beat the best quarterback on the planet, you can't get into a situation where it's potentially a shootout, where it's one-on-one. You got to get up, and you got to get up by enough that makes it impossible for them to come back. We just saw this with Tom Brady. You have to enact the Brady protocols when you're facing Patrick Mahomes. Like, we have seen how to defend this. The only thing that stops Tom Brady, the only thing that stops Patrick Mahomes are the rules of the game, Steph. The fact that it's illegal for Patrick Mahomes to be on the field when your offense has the ball, and in overtime, if you take the ball second, you could score a touchdown, get a 2-point conversion, and Patrick Mahomes can't do anything to stop you. And you have to play to those strengths because those are the real only advantages that you have. You're muted, I think.
Yeah, my bad.
Yes, it wasn't me this time.
Yeah, I agree with all those things. I also, like I said, there's just a lot of there isn't just one single thing we can point to this time, and that's why for me, maybe that's why it hurts more. This was a team loss, and there isn't a Jimmy Garoppolo you can blame. There isn't he abandoned the run you can blame, although some people are still sticking with that one. And so I think there's a lot of things that went wrong before the end, which is why it came down to the end, and 49ers have to make sure that doesn't happen. It's kind of interesting because I feel like the Chiefs almost want to see what you try to do first and they react to it after 2, but for them it works out because they can come back. Like they're just they've been that kind of team. Whereas like 49ers against this team needed to, start hot, put points up on the board, and then keep it that way and continue to score and, keep the game from being too close. So I'm like, if these two teams played in the future, like there's obvious things you can do differently, but at the same time, it's like when it comes to the chess match of it all, I don't know. It just feels like Andy Reid, Mahomes is just so hard to stop. A lot of people are like, it just feels like we're the victims of the next big thing in sports. Like Patrick Mahomes is on his way to having a better Super Bowl record, than Tom Brady and smashing a lot of his records, right? So we are the victims along the way, and we've been victims twice now. And if the 49ers want to be able to beat that, like
you got to be perfect.
Yeah, you got to be perfect, and
they
that's
weren't.
tough.
It sucks. James Welsh says Brandon Ayuk is your youngest and most valuable player on your offense, and his contract can still be negotiated. You can't keep everybody, man. You can't keep everybody. And by the way, dude, the people that they have had, it hasn't worked. So you got to accept that things are going to change. You can't keep everybody together all the time. If I told you could trade Brandon Ayuk, you'll replace him with a wide receiver that's maybe not as good, but you'll also get a draft pick that allows you to take a right guard or a right tackle who ends up being good. Like, you got to factor all that stuff in. It's not just, well, if you get rid of Brandon Ayuk, you got to get a wide receiver that's just as good. Like, everything goes into the stew, but you got to be willing to change some things up. You're not just going to keep running it back with all these guys. That's not how it works. The league is not set up that way. Look at the Chiefs. They traded Tyreek Hill and won back-to-back Super Bowls. You have to be able to adapt.
Yeah. Look, I had Jason Hurley, who's like the 49ers cap guru on Twitter. Great stuff if you guys are into the salary cap numbers. I've had him on my podcast a couple of times. Every time I have him on, I'm like, can the 49ers afford to have Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel? Yes or no? And he's like, yes, they could. And so that gives me some solace, right? The 49ers could afford to have both of them. Even despite all of these big contracts that they have in place, they could do it. Now, is it a good use of resources to have 2 big money contracts tied to your wide receiver room? Like, that's the decision I think that needs to be made more so than can they do it or not. Yes, they could do it. Would they want to? That's another question. So that remains to be seen. If they decide to do that, there's probably another position that they're going to have to, take money from, right? And I think what we're thinking right now is the one position the 49ers need to put a lot more money into is the offensive line. Rob, can we talk about that for a second? Because that is one of the biggest issues. The right side of the 49ers offensive line, to me, is a huge issue. Never mind John Feliciano and Spencer Burford fighting on Twitter. Like, let's talk about the real issue there is the fact that the 49ers need to upgrade that side of their line. And what I worry is that I don't know if Kyle Shanahan feels that way. Like, I really hope, seeing how it all plays out, he kind of realizes that, or someone realizes that. But that's one of the single most important things they need to address this offseason.
Completely agree. That's why they have so much trouble coming back, because their offensive line in straight drop back pass situations is not good enough to hold up. It's not. Go rewatch that game. There's so many instances of Colton McKivitz just getting shoved straight back into Brock Purdy. And people sit there and they're like, oh, Brock's not a game changer. It's like, well, this friggin' right tackle is getting shoved into his lap, or the right guard is getting shoved into his lap, or the offensive line is committing false start penalties left, right, and center. I completely agree with you, Steph. They do need to upgrade the offensive line. Again, that's part of the reason why I'm saying maybe in order to do that in a meaningful way, you do have to trade Brandon Ayuk. I'm just saying, like, what if you traded Ayuk and then you moved up in the draft to take, like, who is it? Joe Alt? Isn't he one of the offensive linemen in this draft that's supposed to be really good? Whoever it might be. My point is, I think you can make an argument that a better offensive line is more valuable to this team than another year with Brandon Ayuk.
I would agree. I think we saw several moments in that game where if Brock Purdy just had a hair of a second, extra, he could have gotten a throw off and it could have gone for a touchdown or it could have gone for a first down in one of those third down situations, right? So yeah, it definitely made an impact. It's made an impact throughout the season. And yeah, the 49ers have had some, questionable offensive lines in the past to start the season and like they kind of gel and get it right by the end. This seemed like it was more so that right side of the line, Colton McKivitz not always being consistent. I mean, talking about guys, defensive linemen just getting put on Brock Purdy's lap. We saw that so many times this year. So that alone should be one of the reasons the 49ers look to target offensive line. They also need to double dip because we don't know how long Trent Williams is going to be on this team either. I know we talked about he doesn't plan to retire after this one, but time is ticking for him as well. And so this is a strong offensive line class. I'm sure we'll talk about it in the coming, next 2 months. But yeah, this is the one that the 49ers need to address offensive line like they never have before.
Totally and completely agree. The offensive line makes everything else you do easier. Just keep that in mind. Beats and Meats says, make a list of all the teams that have beat Mahomes and Brady in the Super Bowl. 10 tries. It's not easy. You just hope that they don't get there. No, build a team that's good enough to beat them. Brady lost twice in the Super Bowl. Mahomes has lost once in the Super Bowl. Like, it's not, I know we always joke about like it feels like they're inevitable, and maybe it feels like that, but they're not. 49ers easily could have won that game if they changed things that were totally in their control. So let's not act like there's nothing we can do. You can't just what are you hoping, that Mahomes doesn't get there, but Josh Allen does, or Lamar Jackson does, or Joe Burrow does? Like, the other options outside of Mahomes aren't good either. You just have to build the best team possible. Let's bang through some of these super chats, Steph. Carlos M says, I trade Brandon Ayuk for Devontae Adams. I don't think the Raiders would do that trade. Just throwing that out there. Gammon Brown, we appreciate you, Gammon, says, how fractured is this team's mental? Vets' health is going to be a problem next year. O&D philosophy needs to be updated for thank you. The mental part of it we talked about, Steph. It's a clear hurdle that has to be overcome. And the health is a real thing too, right? McCaffrey stayed healthy this year. Bosa stayed healthy. Warner stayed healthy. Debo, for the most part, was relatively healthy for him this year. Even Trent Williams, he missed a little time, but I think health-wise, this was objectively the healthiest the 49ers have ever been under Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah, definitely. And definitely going into the Super Bowl, they were really healthy, and you can't really ask for anything better than that. The problem is they suffered a pretty significant injury in the Super Bowl, and that is Dre Greenlaw. That's going to hurt going into next season. It sucks that it had to happen in February. That one's going to linger on into next season. So 49ers have to have, some solution for that as well. Hey, Aziz is a free agent. I don't know. Maybe maybe bring him back. But yeah, the 49ers, again, going to have to make some decisions around a lot of these guys. Again, this was a great roster. Injuries were on your side for much of it. Luck was on your side for much of it. This felt like the best chance to do it, right? Just couldn't get it done.
Brother Bob says college coaches and players know the same rule. Kyle wears too many hats: GM, head coach, offensive coordinator, and drunk kid. And he says team with the better talent lost the Super Bowl. Why? Outcoached again. It's all part of it. Brother Bob says, great thing Kyle refused to even scout Mahomes. That's part of it too, Steph. This is the second Super Bowl they lost to Patrick Mahomes, to a guy that they should have had. And they didn't even check to see if he might be a generational quarterback. That goes on Kyle's tombstone forever. Forever.
It goes on the tombstone of like 31 other teams. I mean,
yeah,
to put it all on Kyle Shanahan for not drafting him is crazy.
No, it's not. He didn't scout him and make a mistake in scouting.
I'm just saying, it's not just like Kyle's not the only guy that passed on Patrick Mahomes. Just like
he's the only guy that didn't scout him.
That and that's baloney too, because there's no way that there weren't scouts on the 49ers that didn't scout him. They get reports on all the players and all that. Now, if Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch didn't want to, they were set on not taking a quarterback, then yeah, that's the end of the conversation. But I'm sure like they did have a Patrick Mahomes report that they went through, just like they do all the other players. It's not like he completely ignored Patrick Mahomes as a prospect, but yeah,
Kyle said, I didn't look into him obviously as much as I should have. We definitely looked into him, studied all his tape, was just a freak, could make every throw, had the ability to do anything. Why wouldn't you look into him as much as you should have?
it's almost like every other team in the NFL had the same exact tape and also didn't make that decision. Like, yes, in hindsight, we can all like look at what Patrick Mahomes is now and be like, wow, like why didn't anyone think to draft him? Just like a bunch of people are looking at Brock Purdy too, last pick in the draft, and all those teams didn't think to draft him either. Like, of course, there were things that Patrick Mahomes maybe was in college that teams didn't like him for because scouting is flawed to some extent. But I mean, hindsight, of course, we're all going to think those things. I mean, every team had the opportunity to draft Patrick Mahomes and didn't. And Mr. J, I am not defending him. I'm just saying, like, why is that relevant today in 2024? Like,
because they lost two
happened.
Super Bowls to him.
It happened years ago, and yeah, no, I totally understand that, but I mean, maybe shouldn't have traded for traded for Jimmy Garoppolo, because then 49ers probably would have had Kirk Cousins and could have been a different story then too.
I think I'm surprised that you're letting Kyle off the hook for the Mahomes thing. I don't think it's as simple as, well, they scouted him and they didn't think he was good enough. When Kyle says
It's not that I'm letting him off the hook. I'm just tired of hearing about it because at this point, like so much has happened in between then and the 49ers have had so many good teams, so many chances to get over this hump. And to me, this team was better than that Patrick Mahomes Chiefs team all season. And even in that, like on paper, better team far and away. So Kyle Shanahan deserves more blame for that game and how it wasn't executed correctly, more so than like what happened like 2 years ago or how many or three, however many years that was. Like, I'm just tired of hearing about it.
he deserves a lot of blame and a lot of credit. That's, again, like, he's the reason they are as good as they are too. He's like, it's like alcohol in The Simpsons, right? The source of and solution to all of life's problems. James Welsh says, you're having trouble reading my chats. This was in addition to my earlier comment. That's why you can trade Ayuk. He's young and most valuable. No one else on the offense will garner a first-round pick. I apologize, James. Didn't mean to misrepresent your position. For King Crazy, YouTube channel member, says, hurting bad. This is the first time since the game is over that I've watched or read anything Super Bowl related. We had our chances and blew it. We will go again. Nick Ellert says, Niners love 2 first-round picks. Ayuk for a future row left tackle, long-term, more valuable, then they can get into the top 15. Yeah, like if you can put a package together, those are all the questions that they have to ask themselves, because nothing is made, no decision is made in a vacuum when it comes to the roster. Everything affects everything else. And they're going to have to decide that as we go forward. Brother, really, Kyle Bob says, don't care about other teams passing on Patrick Mahomes. You do have to bring that up. It's not like the Niners are the only one. The Bears are still kicking themselves over that. James Welsh says, sorry, but the team's not looking into Purdy is not the same as not looking into Patrick Mahomes. I don't even think Brock Purdy is a real franchise quarterback. You know, I saw a tweet before the game, Steph, that said,
I'm not saying it's the same. I'm not saying it's the same. Obviously, Brock Purdy is not Patrick Mahomes. I'm just saying, like, in hindsight, everyone looks at what players become after we have all this information of how good X player is. And then we turn to the draft and say, look at all these teams that didn't know that this player was going to be good. Maybe that should tell you that there were so many other teams that had no idea. Maybe that tells you it wasn't just some slam dunk decision that Kyle Shanahan and everyone else and their mom was supposed to know. Did you guys know? Exactly. So it's just crazy to me why we're still lingering on that as much as we are.
I think the criticism of him doesn't come from the fact that they didn't evaluate him properly as a player. I think the criticism comes from Kyle saying we didn't look into him as much as we should have, and then because they wanted Kirk Cousins. I think it's the combination.
Yeah, I mean, that's egregious, right? Like to even say, because before everything even happened with Deshaun Watson, right? Like Deshaun Watson is a POS, right? But even looking before all of that, he was in that draft too, and they could have had him then. So look, I understand how egregious it was to be like, we're like, be so far-sighted and say like, because we're getting, Kirk Cousins next year, we're not going to look into this player. I totally understand how ridiculous that is. Like, I am not downplaying that part. I'm just saying, like, it happened so long ago, and the 49ers have been in the Super Bowl twice since then. I don't know, it's not the reason that they haven't gone to the Super Bowl. They've gone to the Super Bowl twice. Maybe it's the reason they haven't won one, but also I'll say this: Patrick Mahomes would be an entirely different quarterback in Kyle Shanahan's system.
True.
Let's just say that too.
100%. I absolutely agree. I think that part of the reason that they're so good is because of who Andy Reid is and who Mahomes is, and part of what Andy is doing is sort of letting Patrick Mahomes be Patrick Mahomes, and we don't know that Kyle would ever do that with him. We have no
You
idea.
would probably hate him.
I think that it also keeps coming. It also keeps coming up because the 2 Super Bowls Kyle has lost have been to that guy, so it continues to remain relevant. Like if they had lost, one of the Super Bowls to Josh Allen and another one to Lamar, the fact that they didn't draft Patrick Mahomes is not nearly as relevant as it is because they've lost to specifically that guy. So that is sort of working against them also. We got a long way to go, Steph. It's going to be a crazy offseason. It's going to be a hell of an offseason. We'll be here through all of it. Again, like and subscribe to both channels. There's over 200 people watching right now. We're so grateful for that because I know it's really hard to watch right now. I get it. Like I know that it's painful. And the last thing we want to do is cause you pain, but we can help you get through it, and we will help you get through it, starting with the Shanahan and Lynch press conference today, 1 p.m. Pacific time. One last one from Brother Bob says, love you, Steph, but Kyle can't beat Mahomes equals curse. There's no curses. Curses are not real, people. Come on. You don't buy into that, do you, Steph?
Yes and no. If it becomes really extreme where it's like 50 years of like, drought, like those types of curses, it's like you kind of got to believe them at that point. But no, there's no curse for the 49ers. The only curse is that, Kyle Shanahan hasn't figured out how to manage the end of games quite well, but that's in his control.
Right. And curses end, right? The Red Sox were cursed until they won the World Series. The Cubs were cursed, and then they won the World Series. Like, if curses were real, why would they ever end? That would be my argument. But anyway, thanks to everybody again. Like and subscribe. We appreciate it. We appreciate all the love and support. We'll be here with you every day in the off season. So stick with us. Go Niners, and we'll talk to you soon.